Hello, and welcome to Ex-Cult Ed, the podcast where I share my experiences, thoughts, and feelings after leaving the truth, otherwise known as the 2x2 way, the fellowship, the one true way. You get the picture. Now it's time to share my truth, in the hopes that it will be cathartic for me, and perhaps make you, dear listener, feel less alone if you've been through or are going through something similar. This is my story. This episode was actually recorded 6 months ago, but because of the mental slump that I was in, I hadn't actually got around to editing it until now. So 6 months later, here it is. All right, hello again.
Hi.
Good to have you back again.
Thanks. It's great to be back.
So I was thinking maybe we could talk a bit more about imposter syndrome since I spoke about that in the last episode.
I really enjoyed listening to that. It was a great insight into you and some of the struggles that you faced, and you're still facing.
Maybe we should just define it again in case people haven't listened to it. Imposter syndrome is the fear of people finding out that you're a fraud despite evidence that you're not.
Yep.
So it's not if you're actually a fraud and you're scared that people will find out you're a fraud.
It's basically just a constant fear that you're not as good as everyone else thinks you are.
It's believing that your successes aren't due to you.
Yeah.
That you don't deserve them or you don't deserve anything.
Yeah.
I read somewhere on a website that it's basically the fear that others will see you the way you see yourself.
Mm-hmm.
The way that you see yourself in your head, the way that the negative self-talk about yourself that you have, that others will think that about you.
Yes. Yep. No, that sounds like a really succinct but very accurate definition. It's something that I have a little bit of.
Which is interesting because you don't show it at all. I mean, you're starting your own business. You're very much a go-getter. You come across quite self-confident and self-assured.
Yeah, I'm always hoping that you don't find out that I'm not.
So where do you feel it the most? How are you when it comes to social situations, for example? Because I know we've had conversations before and you've sort of said, oh, I'm very good socially.
Yeah, yep. That's more probably due to practice rather than myself being good. But I'm always like at the beginning of any social interaction and also just all the way through, I think I'm fairly quiet and sometimes I get so excited about a subject that I forget about that part of the imposter syndrome and I just get into it. And then afterwards I'm like, oh, perhaps I came across as stupid, awkward.
So what are your thoughts? What's your inner self-talk with the imposter bit in those sort of social situations?
Well, listening to your explanation of it and just a discussion on how you felt, I think mine is probably more muted. It might just be a tiny amount compared to perhaps the struggles that you face each day. But I do have that just internal monologue of basically anything I do, I'm always critiquing to a pretty high level. And nothing ever seems to be as good as anyone else would do it.
And where do you think that comes from?
I do think that, as you alluded to, I'd say that it does come a lot from the standards that we were facing growing up in the cult, where I guess even every time you got together socially, you're always dressed up in your best. And as a kid, you just think that everyone else looks that way all the time. And then you come home from the meeting and from the religious groups and you're like, get back into your clothes and start doing your thing and start being less Christian, because you can never be as Christian as you are in a meeting. And then all of a sudden you think, well, I'm not as good as everyone else because they're being proper and, everyone laughs at their jokes because that's what I heard after the meeting. And so therefore I'm not as funny, I'm not as smart, I'm not as, good at talking. And even when I'm speaking in a meeting, I don't know what I'm talking about, and I just try to put a few words together and sit down as quick as possible so people don't start laughing.
Well, when you think about it in the meetings, we basically were all imposters because, I don't know about everyone else, but it sounds to me like you felt the same as I did, where my testimony was just me coming up with something from the Bible, and I thought, oh, everyone else has these things revealed to them by God through prayer, and I'm just making up a testimony.
Yeah.
And some weeks I'd even not have any inspiration, so I'd try and Google something.
Yep.
And I'd be like, oh, testimonies from Luke. And I'd just be like, good stories in Luke, things to say from Luke.
Yep.
and then I would just speak on that because I just need something to say.
Yeah.
Because having something inspirational to say was more acceptable than standing up and saying, oh, I didn't read my Bible enough this week, I have nothing to share.
Yeah, that's right. And I did the exact same thing as well. So I do think even just before I and my then partner had left the meetings, when I was just thinking about it all, I did have an understanding that everyone else is probably very similar to you and I, well, especially myself at the time, but now understanding where you come from, you and I are probably the same as everyone else, and everyone else struggles with the same thing. Perhaps there's others that are extremely religious and they get something from God or some feeling and they think about it all week, and to them it's a great cathartic experience, the meetings. But for myself, no.
So basically what I'm trying to say, what I'm sort of thinking based on listening to you, is that everybody in that cult or religion, whatever you want to call it, everybody in there would probably be living in a constant state of imposter syndrome, or feeling that.
That's right.
Because they'll be all going to the meetings thinking that everybody else is more godly and getting this connection with God that they're struggling to have, and everybody's pretending because they think everybody else has it.
Yep. That's right. And by just pretending, everyone's putting more pressure on everyone else because everyone else sees that pretending as something real.
But then is it a little bit different from imposter syndrome because everybody's a fraud? So they actually are a fraud. And so they're worried that people will find out they're a fraud because they are. Because we were a fraud. The thing we're worried about people finding out about us was true. We didn't know what we're doing.
You could be right. It could be something a little bit different to imposter syndrome, where people are afraid of failure that they're actually not experiencing, but they think that they are, and they're not good enough. Whereas,
wow, this is really getting deep.
But I'd love to hear from others to see if they felt the same thing, if they were in meetings, or if they still feel that right now.
I mean, there were times when I was in there that I did feel like I was spoken to by God.
Yep.
There was times where I had what I felt at the time were really clear signs, but they were few and far between. But yeah, I guess part of it was we were all living to the standards of the cult. We were doing our best to live to those standards.
Yeah.
So we didn't have any evidence showing that we were these horrible sinners, yet we felt like we were constant failures.
Yeah, and we used to always say that we were constant failures in the meetings, but always, of course, trying to put on a show that we were perfect.
Yeah, and then the other side of it is we were constantly scared of being found out that we weren't these perfect, godly people based on our thoughts, or even if we were doing something that could appear ungodly, but it wasn't, we were still worried about what people would think about it.
And maybe that was more for the case that happens with women, especially because there's a whole lot more pressure placed on girls than on women, I think. That's why I do think that, say, the imposter syndrome that we're talking about now, or how we felt during meetings, I probably felt it a whole lot less intense than you did. Simply because there was not that pressure that you and other girls faced.
Yeah. Well, I do remember my cousin sort of saying to me that I shouldn't be dating so many people because it would make me look really bad.
Yeah,
that sort of stuff.
Whereas that wouldn't have happened with guys. So yeah,
people pleasing was the first one of the 4 P's of imposter syndrome. Where do you stand on that? I would guess that you are mildly that one, or maybe even more than mildly.
Probably more than mildly. I think you're right there. That could be more of a natural thing rather than just of the pressure of being in the cult. But I think that would add a little bit to it. Never wanting to make waves because there was always people above you, like workers in charge. You had to obey your parents and your family and anyone who was older than you, basically. So there was a lot of pressure to say yes and do whatever you were told.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole thing of God first, others second, and ourselves last. So
yeah.
And then there was also, I just thought of that hymn as well. That's just, I will say yes to Jesus.
Yeah.
Yes, Lord, forever. Yes. Yeah.
See, we remember those songs already.
Oh, of course, they're stuck in our head.
Yeah.
People pleasing is sort of a hard one to get out of because our value as part of the cult and part of that group was largely based on how other people saw us, and probably our own opinion of ourselves and our self-worth and our value to God, even our perceived value to God, was based on how we thought other people viewed us.
Yeah, yep.
And especially the workers.
That's right. Yep. That was always the number one pressure. Though we didn't really see workers enough to be, for me, myself anyway, I didn't really see workers enough to feel that much pressure from them.
So where does self-love come in that then? Because I think that's something that I'm still learning to do, and it's not very, I don't think it's a big thing in the cult at all. I don't think people have high self-esteem or really know how to love themselves.
No, not unless they've learnt that independent of the cult, but even just understanding and appreciating ourselves, that's not really looked on favourably there, is it?
No, and I think the thing is that you look at people in the cult, they seem very calm, well put together, collected, but I don't think that is them practicing good emotional regulation. I think it's more them practicing good emotional, putting it in a box and ignoring it and pushing it down.
Yep, that's right. Yep, stuffing it in the bottom of their lives and trying to ignore that it actually exists.
Just putting it away and putting on a mask.
Yep. That sounds like my whole childhood.
Everybody experiences positive and negative emotions and depression and anger. I don't know if everybody experiences depression, but sadness and anger and anxiety, all of those things. And you don't hear a lot of people in these high control religions or in the one we were in talking about all of that array of emotions. They mostly talk about joy and trusting in God. They don't talk about, I was feeling so anxious and I'm so worried about death. You know, even at funerals, people don't go there and say, I'm so stressed about dying. This makes me anxious. I'm worried about this. Or we talk about putting our worries in God's hands. And
that's right. Yeah. Yep. And also just the whole messiness of human existence, of the fact that we do have emotions that are up and down, that we have as many or even more sad times as we do happy times. And they're needed, because if we don't have the down times, we don't know what it is to feel happy or excited.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think even the joyful times in cults are very much repressed, because you're not supposed to feel sad. So you don't know what happy is.
Yeah, well, they speak about joy as just being this calm acceptance sort of thing.
Yeah, yep. And even just talking about being joyful in, in doing what you're supposed to do in church and all the rest. And I've never saw people really excited about something, or, perhaps like...
Sings.
Sings perhaps, but that was more just a chance to get together, have a bit of singing, and then talk.
Yeah. We've sort of covered the people-pleasing bit a little bit.
Yes.
We've more talked about pushing our self-esteem down as well, which comes with it, is not pleasing yourself, basically.
Yeah.
Which is something we're actually really proud of. We would stand up and tout how good we were for not pleasing ourselves.
Yes, that's right.
So the next one of the 4 Ps is perfectionism. Where do you stand on that?
Probably not that much perfectionism, actually. That's something I don't really struggle with. So that would, I know people-pleasing is a big thing to me, so the low perfectionism would just reduce the amount of imposter syndrome I have, I think. So quite a little bit of that.
Whereas I'm very high on perfectionism.
Yeah.
I expect a lot from myself and also from others around me, especially people who are, say, my significant other. I place high standards on them as well, which isn't necessarily fair, but I think, I don't know, I guess I see them as an extension of myself.
So that, I think you can have elements of perfectionism in a healthy way, but when it's tied to all the rest of the Ps, then that's when it really probably starts biting into imposter syndrome. So I think perfectionism in and of itself isn't specifically something bad. It's just what degree it is and
how you take it.
And how much pressure you place on yourself by it. Yeah.
So for me, an example is in school. If I didn't get top marks, and I mean 100%, I would feel like I failed. So I would still just get an A, and I'd be miserable that I didn't get an A+++.
Yeah, yes, yep. Okay.
And even if I got an A+, I'd be like, why isn't it an A++?
That's right.
And if I got an A++, I'd be like, why isn't it an A++?
Yes, yeah.
So it was never, ever enough.
Yeah, and if you got full marks, you'd be like, well, obviously that test wasn't hard enough, otherwise I would have failed it.
No, actually, that's not it. If I got full marks, I would wonder why I didn't get bonus points.
Okay. Gee. Struggle.
And when I think back about it, actually, I went so far to that extreme that I took it so far in year 12 that I wasn't going to attend my biology exam.
Wow.
because I thought that I hadn't attended the classes enough and I didn't know enough to take the exam.
Yep.
And it was actually Mum and some preachers that encouraged me to attend the exam.
Okay.
And so I went because I was like, well, what do you have to lose if you go and fail? You're going to fail anyway if you don't go.
That's right, yeah.
And I was going to just not go because I thought I'd fail. So I was like, well, what's the point? So I went and took the exam. And because I was so sure I was going to fail, I ended up correcting the teacher's questions because her English in the questions was her grammar wasn't great. So I corrected some of her grammar on the questions on the exam.
Yep.
I ended up getting pretty high marks for that exam, to my surprise. But at the end of the paper, she'd written, "It pays not to get bitchy with your teacher or they might be tempted to fail you." But I did it because I thought I was failing anyway.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you had to at least prove that you were good at something.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was, I think that was me with the perfectionism playing out because I thought I don't know enough, so I'm a fraud at this, and the exam is going to call me out, obviously. So I was pretty much on the path to self-sabotage there. Yeah,
that's right. But also you just had that sinking feeling in the pit of your stomach that there was nothing you could do about it. You were a failure then, so and you just didn't want to turn up.
The thing is, without even trying, though.
Yeah.
Without even giving it a go.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. It's always easier to, I'm guessing for imposter syndrome people, especially me, it's always easier to say, oh, I didn't do it, so that's why I failed, rather than I gave it a red hot try and still failed.
Well, that comes down to being safe, right? We'll do everything we can to feel safe. And when we feel fear, that emotion of fear, our body, our system, our emotions and our thoughts, our brain and our body want to make us safe.
Yep.
So the safest thing sometimes is to avoid it, to go away, to self-sabotage, because then we have a story and a reason instead of having to admit, oh, maybe I'm just not that smart, or maybe I'm not good at maths, or maybe I'm not this or I'm not that. So instead of admitting that perhaps we're a little weaker in some areas and that's okay, we actively sabotage ourselves.
Yeah, yep. I think that's very much the story. Also, I think because imposter syndrome people have an extremely critical self-talk, the thing we're actually protecting ourselves against is our own internal monologue, because we don't want to wake up the next morning or the morning of the exam results and say, yeah, I tried and completely failed.
Yeah. Shall we move on to the next one?
Yes, certainly.
The third P is paralysis. So that is not being able to make decisions, just sort of getting stuck, I guess.
Yeah, okay. In engineering, we call it analysis paralysis. Mm-hmm. So a lot of engineers, especially young ones, you get so in your head about having to make sure that everything checks out and nothing's going to fall down or break, that you spend so long just trying to redo the maths, make sure you haven't made any mistakes, and you get stuck in that and don't even move on to finalizing designs and getting things built.
I guess that comes with overthinking.
I think it does, yep. Another protective instinct, but...
trying to see all the ways that things could go wrong, all the possible scenarios and what to do about them, and then you just get so stuck in that.
Yep, because your overactive imagination gives you a million different examples of how you will fail.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going to suggest that maybe the paralysis part comes from being raised in a cult where we didn't have to make a lot of choices. Our choices were laid out for us. So we were told exactly how to live. We were basically given a blueprint for how to live our life.
Yep.
And that even went down to career, to marriage, to raising children, to everything. You just had to basically select a path and follow it.
Yep. That's right. No trying to find your own way. You just follow the tried and true wheel treads and just go from there without thinking.
Because say with career, for example, it wasn't really something we had to put a lot of thought into because your job was just a way to earn money to live your life for God and get through this life.
That's right. Yep. It was just what you did as a hobby in between meetings.
When it comes to, say, moral and ethical decisions, we didn't really have the choice. We didn't have to think for ourselves because that was all laid out in the Bible or by the preachers, or if we came up against a moral dilemma, often we wouldn't think it through for ourselves. We would ask the preachers or our parents or someone older than us.
And they would have a very firm opinion, which you could not change or even question, and you went from there.
Yeah.
Which is why they often, a lot of Christian cults and also, well, any religious cults and also ours, really look down on philosophy.
Yeah, see, I studied psychology and philosophy in high school.
Yep,
and the preachers,
the two wrong ends.
Yeah, and the preachers actually came to the house and told me that I shouldn't be studying those subjects.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they were very against that.
See, I think that's another thing where they're very happy to approach women and say, no, you don't do that. Whereas, say, as a young man, if I were to do that, they'd think, well, you're a bit weird. But we do trust that you're not going to find yourself in any trouble and you're going to be a very, very great Christian philosopher.
I don't know. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So coming out of that, though, that whole system that tells you exactly how to think morally and ethically and all of that, even how to vote, really.
Yeah.
How are you finding navigating life and its many moral and ethical dilemmas now?
I think in terms of the analysis thing that I was talking about, I really enjoyed, even before I'd left the cult, I really enjoyed reading philosophy just when I was, working, come home at night and just read a little bit. And, I discovered from there just interesting questions that I would never have been even allowed to muse about as a young kid. And that sort of helped me to consider the cult from different angles, I think.
But what about making decisions for yourself, for example?
So that's always going to be hard, I think, for me. I've always struggled with that a little bit too. I do know, so some of my friends are extremely quick at making decisions, and I guess they make good ones. I don't know them that deeply.
Are these friends outside?
Outside the cult, yeah, yep. And they just go, oh, let's try this and do it. Whereas I'd be one to be, very slow and cautious and careful about any decisions I made because you didn't want to make the wrong one.
Do you think that's related to being raised that way, where it wasn't, you making your own decisions wasn't really valued highly?
I think so, yes. So, of course, on both sides of my family, I think family just selected an occupation or, grew up on a farm or something and just went and did that. And there was no thought needed. So if I was starting to think about philosophy, why would you do that? That's just a waste of time.
Say even your career. I mean, you and your siblings have sort of followed your dad's career trajectory.
Yes,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I personally, on the paralysis side, find it very hard to make decisions, and whether that's career, friendships, relationships, and even just the moral dilemmas of life. I struggle with that a lot now because I used to see things in very black and white, and now I know that things aren't black and white. I really struggle with figuring out what's right and wrong because so many people have so many different opinions, and one person will say that something's wrong and someone else will be like, no, there's just another perspective.
Interesting. Yeah, okay.
So, some of my friends will say, you shouldn't do this. This is wrong. You shouldn't live your life this way. And other people will be like, well, why not?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I don't know anymore. So in a way, being in the cult was good for my psyche because it gave me a clear set of boundaries and rules to follow.
Yep.
Now that I don't have those and I sort of have to create them myself, I find myself getting very confused and sometimes perhaps hurting people, not meaning to, but just because I'm trying to figure out how to do life now, how to navigate life, relationships, all sorts of things. And
you're in the middle of a choppy life sea with no floor and no sides to direct you, yeah. Yep.
Yeah, just figuring that out because I'm like, well, I used to have these moral views, but now I'm open to all sorts of things. In fact, I have a friend who was wanting to, for my birthday, gift me a session with a sex therapist or a woman's circle kind of thing. And that sort of world, the people that my friend was referring me to are very different sort of people than the ones I'm used to hanging out with. And being around, and they have very different views on life and very different lifestyles. What I mean by that is when I looked at their profile, they work in the adult entertainment industry.
Okay.
And that's something that I have always been quite morally against. Obviously, in the cult, I had very strong views on that.
Absolutely.
And now that I'm out, it's hard to change and challenge those views, and I haven't really had to.
Yep.
But at the same time, I'm like, well, I might still keep my same morals and ideals, but I'm open to hearing other people's views now. And this is the thing is, now I'm always open to having my morals challenged.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a good thing or not, because I think when people are very set and firm on their boundaries and their morals, they at least know where they're going and what they believe in. Whereas I'm just like, oh, this is what I think, but maybe it could be wrong because maybe these other people know more about it than me. And then I'm very easily influenced by whoever I surround myself with.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
So that's another side to it as well, because I doubt myself, because I know I was raised a certain way.
Yep.
And these other people have all this worldly experience. So I tend to look to them as the Yodas of the world.
Yeah. Yep, the guiding light.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
replace God with them, and everything will be fine.
yeah.
But it's interesting because I was going to say to you, well, how do you feel in your gut? But then again, that is shaped by your upbringing.
Yeah.
And your gut would be like, no, that's
Yeah.
terrible.
And
No,
that's the
don't
thing
do
is,
that.
I've learned not to trust my gut at all. But
Yeah.
we learned not to trust our gut in the cult anyway.
We did, yeah.
Because we didn't go by that. We went by whatever God said in the Bible.
Yeah.
So I've got a long time not trusting my gut.
Yep.
And now I feel like I can't trust my gut because a lot of the things that my gut feelings are based on are wrong. The beliefs, they're flawed.
They've been challenged after you've left the cult and they've been found wanting.
Yeah, I guess moving on to the last of the 4 Ps is procrastination.
Yep.
I don't really relate to this one.
Okay. I'll probably relate to this one more than you.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yep.
We're pretty much opposites on this.
I think so.
Like,
yeah,
I'm the
yeah.
perfectionism and the paralysis.
Yep, and I'm
and
the
you're-
people-pleasing and procrastination.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think just in my happiness in general, I think when
Yes.
things start going
Good.
smoothly and it looks like I'm going to be happy, then I sabotage it somehow.
Yep, you start picking it apart.
And I think it's a subconscious thing. My brain is just like, oh, things are going good. This can't be. It's going to fail. So I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find something to ruin this.
Tear it down so it doesn't tear me down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're still on procrastination with you. You haven't really.
Sorry about that. I
Yeah,
was just procrastinating.
procrastinating.
Just going to mention that. Yeah. So, well, with procrastination, so I have really struggled with it, and I think that comes back down to just being paralyzed in what we should do, rather than taking chances in the cult. We were really discouraged from that, I think. So anything new seems to be a chance. I don't think you struggle with that so much. Perhaps if I'm right in saying it's because you've always challenged yourself with having to do a lot and get things done. Whereas myself, I've probably challenged myself in being, well, am I doing it right?
Yeah, I guess I've always been one of those people that likes to have all my jobs out the way before I have fun, but there's always jobs, so I'm trying to learn to put them aside and have a bit of fun. But yeah, I need strategies for that. So I tend to say, even if I go away, I come home and I'm like, oh, there's a list of jobs I have to do, and I try and smash them out.
Yeah.
I struggle to just read a book and relax in general. So that's something that I need to learn more. So yeah, procrastination, I really don't identify with at all, because even when I'm forced to relax, I just get antsy.
Yeah. I seem to want to combine both, jobs and work and pleasure. So I'll probably do things really quickly if there's something I enjoy doing, and perhaps be more inclined to put it off until another day, until it's really necessary to be done if I don't enjoy doing it.
I see, say for uni, for example, I was always the one who was, as soon as I got an assignment, I would start on it that day and I'd work at it until it was finished.
I used to time it perfectly to get it started just before I ran out of time to even do it. So
see, that's what I never understood. I never understood the people who would just leave it to the night before. I could not imagine that stress, because I would do 3 drafts or more. I would do so many drafts of my assignments. I'd go through them so much. And then even when it was finished, I would keep researching and seeing if there was more interesting things I could put in. Because I'd get quite interested in it then, and the learning. I love learning.
Yeah, yep.
So I'd find more papers, and then I'd be like, oh no, I can't because the word count. So I'd have to edit it down and compact it more so I could fit this other information in.
Yeah, okay. So when I was doing my university courses, I've really enjoyed everything about that. So, after the lecture, we got an assignment to do that was due in, say, 4 weeks, and I'd be straight to the library to read up on it because it was just something that just sparked my mind. I was like, this is amazing. So but I never managed to put pen to paper until I really needed to do so. Mm. But by then, I understood it enough to bang it out as quickly as I could and get a reasonable mark. So
it's kind of procrastination, but not really.
That's right, yeah.
See, whereas I've also been someone who turns up for things early or on time. I hate being late. I'd rather be half an hour or an hour early than 5 minutes late.
Yep.
You would never turn up to the Sunday morning meeting late.
No.
You'd always arrive early, and there was a proper appropriate window. You couldn't really go to someone's house half an hour early and sit in their lounge room.
Yeah, but it was actually quite interesting just to watch all of the different families because they all had their specific time that they had arrived just before. Did you remember that?
Did you have it in your house or?
No, basically just throughout all the meetings that I attended, the ones in people's homes, everyone had their time that they arrived. And interestingly, they arrived within a minute of every time. So
really?
Just like we used to arrive at, say, meetings were at
10 o'clock or something.
10:30. So we would arrive at, I think, about 18 minutes past. All the time.
I never paid attention to that.
I did. Oh. And there was others who would rock up at 25 minutes past and they'd all just tumble in and still early, but not as early as everyone else who was sitting there at their appointed time.
See, it was a bit different for me because my Sunday morning meeting was across the road.
Yep.
So I would just sit at the window and be like, oh, Nana Nance has arrived, and oh, look, there's Papa Sid, and there's Uncle Terry or whoever had come. Once a few cars had come, we'd just go over.
Yeah.
So we wouldn't have to do the whole timing the drive and arriving at the time because it was just across the road.
Yeah.
If we were late, it was like, what?
Yeah.
Sorry, the traffic.
You couldn't be late.
Yeah, so I didn't really have that. And then for our Wednesday night read, it was actually at a different house we had to drive to. But for some reason, our Wednesday night read got really bad attendance. They kept adding people to the Wednesday night to our one. Yep. So if everybody came, they probably wouldn't have fit in the room.
Yep.
But most of the time, it was just Mum and I and the host.
Serious?
So it was just 3 of us.
Wow. I could never believe that would happen in the cult.
No, it was very nerve-wracking for me.
Yep.
Because being so young,
you were speaking first.
Well, I wasn't speaking first. Often I would wait for, it was a lovely man, Uncle Gilbert. I loved him.
Yep.
He would normally go first and he would speak for a while.
Yep.
So that sort of gave me time to gather my thoughts. But it meant
settle your nerves.
Yeah, but it also meant that I didn't get to listen, take anything in. It was just me.
Stressing.
Yeah. And especially with the prayers as well, I'd always be like, "Speak, can you pray longer, please?
Yeah.
Give me time to get I'd have to figure out my 3 lines beforehand."
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, that was the Wednesday nights. I think because some of the members were a bit further away, maybe that they didn't come. I don't know.
Yeah, okay.
But yeah, the attendance was just very bad.
Yeah, I see. So with ours, everyone appeared every meeting, unless they were sick.
Well, that's what you were meant to do. I just don't know what happened with ours.
Yeah.
Say with your business, for example, do you have any worries that people will think that you're a fraud or not good at what you do, or you have quite a lot of confidence in what you're doing?
No, well, I still have worries about that. Being good at business, being organised, turning up on time. Is a big thing, because if you're just not showing up at the right time, you're just not reliable. So people will find someone else. But in terms of actually doing what I do, I always get to a job and think, oh no, what am I going to be faced with today? But as soon as I get into it, my mind goes away from who I am and I'm straight into the problem. So I think maybe that's more engineering training.
Yeah.
But very focused on solving problems, and I've never really had the fear that I can't do it.
See, I was going to suggest that maybe it's also a bit of a difference between men and women, because for me, when applying for jobs, if I see a job listing at the moment and they say that they want something and I don't have that thing, then I'll probably close it. Whereas I've heard that men will apply for everything and things that they're not even qualified for. So I've started trying to do that because I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, what's the worst that can happen? They don't get back to you.
That's right.
So you may as well apply.
Yep.
So I'm going to try starting to do that. But then my worry is that what if I get that job and then I can't do it because I'm not qualified? I have no idea what I'm doing.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So basically most men think, well, if I can't do the job, no one else will be able to anyway.
Yeah.
And if I don't apply, someone else with the exact same experience and skills as me will apply. They'll bumble through it for 6 months and then learn it.
And
so
see,
I may as well do that too.
See, when I think further into it, though, if I get the job and I can't do it, then what's the worst that can happen? Then I quit or they fire me.
Yep, and you're back to square one.
Yeah.
Where you were at the start.
Yeah. But for some reason, my fear of not being good enough at the job or the fear of failing stops me from applying in the first place. But then even if I do apply, then there's been a few jobs that I've applied for that I'm not qualified for and I've got interviews for, and then I just haven't made an interview time because I'm worried that if I get the job, I'll make a fool of myself. You're right. Someone else with my same qualifications will probably get the job anyway.
That's right. And they'll muddle along for 6 months and you would do the same or better.
I mean, I don't lie on my resume or my cover letters. So if they're hiring me, then the quality of people applying are the same as me.
Or worse anyway, because some other people might lie on their cover letters and their resumes.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
I was actually reading this book today and it was about patterns, and it was saying that all of us fall into specific patterns and a lot of them are subconscious. So it's based on your core beliefs. So if you believe that you're constantly prone to accidents, for example, there's those people that are just always falling off ladders, getting in car accidents.
Being really clumsy.
Yeah. Or there's people who just constantly have life drama.
Yep.
So there's just one thing after another
I've noticed that. So I haven't experienced, but I've noticed that there are some people who are just have drama every day of their lives.
And then it was talking about how we form these patterns through our childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just really interested in that because if you can change your thinking, so if you think that you're someone and you think it subconsciously and you take notice of your thoughts, you think that you're someone who's really unhealthy, and so you can't stick to a diet and you keep eating unhealthy things. And then if you change your thinking to I am healthy, then maybe you'd be able to live a more healthy lifestyle.
Yeah, stick to it a bit easier. It's
like someone told me if you want to be an artist, you have to start calling yourself an artist. Or if you want to be a writer, you don't say, oh, I'm an aspiring writer or I'm wanting to be a writer. You say, I am a writer.
Or you say nothing until you've written 2 books and then you call yourself a writer. No, that doesn't happen, does it? Yeah.
But if you start calling yourself a writer, then you are a writer. You become a writer. You're more likely to, perhaps.
Yeah. Very interesting. Because I remember just being an employee, and that's how I thought of myself. But as I'm running my own business, I'm beginning to think of myself more as a business person, which is a big change in how you view yourself. So perhaps that's going to change patterns as well. Yeah,
well, the book I was reading was saying that we establish relationships with other people based on how our relationships with our parents were. So if they were really loving, then we seek out loving relationships. But if they were abusive, then that's a pattern that we seek out in relationships and we repeat it over and over subconsciously.
Yeah. I would think that, of course, even with parents, you'd never have, perfectly nurturing or 100% neglectful, but I think there may have been aspects of different things that I probably look for in relationships as well.
Yeah, we'll say even emotional availability. I imagine a lot of people in the cult probably had parents who weren't super emotionally available.
Yep.
And then they end up in relationships that are the same because that's what they know.
Yeah.
I know for myself, my father was quite emotionally abusive and controlling.
Yep.
And I don't know if that's a tendency that I seek out in partners consciously, or not consciously, but I don't know if that's something that sort of a pattern that I find myself in.
Yeah.
The thing about patterns is you're never stuck in them.
Yeah, so you can change them. How do you change them, do you think? What would work for you?
Well, the thing is, like, even with the therapist that he was trying to get me to do was to first work out my current pattern of thinking. So, like the therapist said, if I'm ever thinking I never, or I always, or I should, any thoughts about myself, follow them and figure out what that belief is, and then change it. For say with me with the jobs, I'm like, well, I'm always getting bullied at jobs. So why is that? Well, I guess I don't think I'm as good at the job as everybody else, or I'm not as valuable as everybody else. So in my next job, I need to go in thinking I'm a valuable addition to this company. Like I'm worth as much as everybody else here.
And I can do just as good a job.
Because the thing is, as well, is the way that we feel about ourselves is reflected in the world around us. So if we hate ourselves, we hate everyone else. If we love ourselves, we love the world. We think it's great. So if I'm going into work feeling like I'm not as good as everyone else and I'm not good enough, then I'll feel like everybody's treating me as though I'm less than as well. I'll interpret things. We look for confirmation of what we believe.
But you'll also be very, very reactive in terms of being quiet and just saying yes and being submissive in that way. And I think other people who aren't kind would take advantage of that.
Yeah, we'll see. There's even the self-sabotaging part of that then, because say you see something at work that you could do better or you'd like to change, you don't speak up because you're like, well, I'm not valuable. It's probably wrong. And even perhaps I find myself deferring to other colleagues and asking questions about things or clarification for things that I could just do. I could just figure out myself.
Even if they've started work a lot after you, you ask them and then all of a sudden they start thinking, well, I know more than her. She's useless, and then start putting you down.
Because I treat them as the authority. Well, the interesting thing is that in this specific book I was reading, and what was it? It was just called Being Happy, and I'm only a little way into it, but it spoke about how our self-confidence is basically what we make it. The more that we tell ourselves something about ourselves, the more we tell other people that thing about ourselves, and that then decides our self-worth. So if we can just change that. So if you can get the people around you even to catch you when you're doing negative self-talk and then you say the opposite of that, then you can slowly change your self-worth. So something I was trying to do ages ago, and I've sort of stopped it, was having a mantra, I am loved, I am valuable, I am brave, or, just saying these things every day and just saying them over and over while breathing and just doing that 5 minutes a day. But I stopped doing that. So I think that is probably a valuable thing to do. I might have to write myself another mantra. In fact, I think I will.
Good stuff.
No, I think I will. I will.
I think that would be really valuable. And I do like the thought of you tell other people about things about yourself that then they start seeing you in that light, start talking about you and talking to you as if you are that.
But basically, the book is implying that if we're not happy and we have low self-worth, it's basically because of ourselves and what we're telling ourselves. So we decide what our self-worth is and how much happiness to expect from the world. So
interesting.
For me to address the symptoms of imposter syndrome, I need to address my negative self-talk. So I need to pull myself up on it. And there was even something that I was doing with the therapist, was he was telling me to list positive things about myself. So I take compliments very badly. That's one other thing that you might want to look into as well, why you do that. So the book was saying a good self-image allows us to focus on compliments and successes that we get, whereas for me, I focus on the failures and the criticisms rather than the compliments. If people compliment me, I just brush it off. I'm like, oh, they're just being nice, or they want something. So if people compliment me, I'm like, well, what do they want?
So I think being able to criticize oneself is important, but it seems to me, this one from someone who's not at all qualified in this, you don't seem to have that buffer of self-worth. Whereas someone like me, in a little bit of a way, I would take on criticism and go, okay, I can improve on that. But underneath, I would think, well, I am a valuable person. I'm just not good at this. So if I improve that, I'm still good.
my father used to tell me that I had an inferiority complex.
Whoa.
And I think that was actually one thing that was true, though.
It may have been,
Because the other thing is, another thing that was interesting in the book was saying that if you have a healthy self-love, you don't have to justify everything to other people and to yourself. So say you sleep in one day, or a planned sleep in, that is, or you buy a new pair of shoes, or you want to go on a holiday. You have to
justify that you're not lazy, that you're not overspending. That
because of your self-worth. So, and I think too, accepting a compliment makes me feel like a fraud is the other thing. So if someone says, oh, you're smart, or you're this, or your food is good, and for me to accept that makes me feel like a fraud, because I know in myself, and this is where it's the self-talk, that I'm not those things. So I need to tell myself that I am. So if people say, oh, this food is delicious, I can tell myself, yeah, I'm a good cook. I made that food. And
you made it really well.
Yeah.
And you're proud of it. Whereas pride in things like that would be something that you would try to push away, perhaps.
I don't take pride in anything, because I'm always like, oh, I hope it's good enough. We were very much creatures of habit, and we very much had certain patterns when we were living in the cult. So we had very rigid lives.
Exactly. So breaking out of that might be difficult to do, but I think it'd be worth it in some ways.
When we have 26 or more, it's 26 specific to me, but when we have that many years of thinking in a certain way about ourselves, it's really hard to change that.
Definitely.
And I do think that those type of religions really stamp on your self-esteem and your self-worth, because that's how they get you to stay. That's why you keep going back to God, and you're this horrible sinner person who's not worth anything except for God.
That's right.
Looking at you and loving you and lifting you up again.
So, and you better dare not to do that to yourself. So
we never learn to lift ourselves up. We never learn to love ourselves, because imagine someone going to a meeting being like, well, this week I achieved a lot and I lifted myself up, and I feel good. And
I'm quite proud of myself, even though I don't think I'm the best. I think I did a good job this time. So I'd look at you and go, you really need church again.
Well, they would then say that you have a superiority complex or something.
That's right. Yeah. You're lifting yourself up.
You're not humble then, clearly. And so I rarely learnt to be proud of anything, because I was like, well, even if it's all great, there's something bad in there. I think journaling will help me with that a lot too.
That's good.
Which I need to get more into. I have found lately that when I'm journaling, I perhaps even have a tendency to lie to myself in my journaling. So I need to get down to being a bit more honest on what I think about myself and everything as well.
And then I think hopefully you can look at that and perhaps pick up at later points, or even while you're writing, things that you believe inherently and deep down but perhaps aren't quite true. Because I think a lot of people go through trauma through their lives. Do we all have a little bit of imposter syndrome, or is it usually involved in a lot of like emotional abuse in terms of cults and other upbringings, which are really difficult for kids? So if we were to get rid of, if we were to reduce imposter syndrome in our life, would that help us to be happier? Just looking at the Being Happy book that you've been reading.
Well, I think so, but I don't think you can just reduce imposter syndrome. I think it has to be addressing the self-talk. That then... That's
the basis of it.
And even to get to the self-talk bit, I think perhaps you have to start with, what actions am I doing? See, I can see that I self-sabotage. So what's causing me to do that? What thought processes are leading to that? Because when you can see a pattern, so I can see that I am doing things.
So does the self-sabotage come before the self-talk? I'd say the self-talk would come first. Do you think?
So sort of working backwards is the thing, because often we have this self-talk that we don't really know. We're not aware of. It's really hard to tap into, especially when it's a subconscious belief about ourselves that we then act on. Sometimes it's perhaps easier to pick up on the actions that we're doing and being like, okay, I'm in this pattern and it's not serving me. So what's causing the pattern? Because sometimes it's hard to just get straight down to the cause.
Definitely is. And I think in terms of moral philosophy, a lot of philosophers talk about an impartial observer. In the cult, we would have had that as God, and he would have said that we're all useless, or at least we're all sinful, and basically suppress who we are and become more like my son. Whereas I think if we were to push away from that, we need to be able to see ourselves from a third person, but also just appreciate things that we have never otherwise appreciated before.
I think sharing good things helps build yourself up as well, and then you get good things back.
I think so as well, yep.
Looking forward to our next chat. I've actually had a listener send in I don't know what you call it, a zine or a zine?
Zine, magazine, short for zine.
I had a listener send in a zine that they wrote about their experience in the cult, and it's really interesting, and they said that I could share it with you. So maybe in the next while we could have a look at that and maybe have a chat about it.
I'd love to read it.
Yeah, it's really cool how different people express themselves. So I am doing it through words and through making this podcast, and this person is doing it through creating a zine, like a
graphic non-fiction.
Yeah, and then other people do it through creating videos or through body movement, I guess, through singing. I've seen some people doing it through humour.
Yep.
It's been really great seeing some of the people who are doing like convention bingo and really just really funny posts, making up mock sermons that we can all laugh at.
That has been good on the online forums, hasn't it?
I've loved reading those. If you ever see any, share them with me. I think they're really great. They make me laugh.
And a shout out to those out there doing that. You always put a smile on our faces.
Their creativity is just
mind-boggling.
It's great, yeah. I mean, all the times that we had to make up sermons.
Yeah. Put it towards more productive uses of making everyone else laugh.
Yeah, I'm really, really enjoying seeing how people are coming out of it and expressing themselves in that way.
Great. Yeah, well, so am I. I think it'll be maybe a promising future to look forward to.
And you've been really encouraging for me with this podcast too. I'm really thankful for the encouragement on it, because even just doing this, I feel like I'm not qualified, so here I am talking about things, and every time I put out an episode, I'm expecting comments being like, what you're saying is wrong, you're this and you're that. And I have had a few comments of people saying, sounds like you're beating up on Christianity, which I'm not at all.
Yep.
Some of my best friends are Christian, no.
Yeah.
But I do have Christian friends, and I actually have a natural tendency to trust Christians because I know what they stand for.
Yeah.
And I agree with a lot of what they stand for, a lot of their morals and things. So
That's right,
I'm definitely not against Christianity at all.
I don't believe you are, and I think a lot of the questions that you pose and that you try to answer in your own life is not a reflection on Christianity itself, but it could be seen to be that way by others. But I don't think it really comes from that place in your heart.
No, well, I'm just looking at the way I was raised and how that affects the way I think now.
Yeah.
And trying to grow as a person. So that's pretty much all it is. I don't think I've really said the cult itself is bad. I've just pointed out bad aspects of it.
That's right.
In calling it a cult is a thing. Some people view it as a religion rather than a cult.
But I think it does meet the definition of a cult, and also a lot of things do. Anything from political parties to or any organisation can often be a cult, and usually is.
I'm just expecting people to say that I don't know anything about anything, which is kind of true. I'm here just researching.
I don't think so. I'm really proud of this podcast that you've created, and that you're still continuing, and I think you're doing amazing work, and the thoughts that you present are really deep and well worth listening to and responding to, I think.
I think over time it might deviate from being specifically cult focused to more psychology focused. But yeah, I'd just definitely like to keep making ones on here with my progress and the things I'm learning and hearing a bit about you whenever you have time. And if I meet anyone else who wants to come on and say something, that would be interesting as well.
Great. I'd love to listen, and I always enjoy the episodes that you put out and the things that you discuss about your life and about what you've seen.
You know what I might do, actually? I might see if one of my worldly friends, my normal people friends, will come on and have a chat about their perspective on it from knowing me, meeting me and how they found it. Just learning about all my weirdness and everything.
Yes, that would be really great to listen to, actually.
Yeah, I'll see if anyone will come on and talk about that.
Yeah.
Well, we are not drinking, so we can't really cheers.
No.
Everyone will be very happy about that.
That's right, yeah. Less slurping, more thinking.
Thanks for coming on. We'll see you again next time.
Thank you very much for having me on.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate you. If you'd like to reach out, ask any questions, share your story, say whatever you need to say, email me at exculted@gmail.com. That's exculted@gmail.com. This episode is edited by Little Old Me. The music is created by Soul Prod Music. Always remember, you can walk your own way, speak your own truth, and live your own life. Bye!